Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Sanctuary Podcast. We're so glad you've joined us, given us your time, and allowed us to come into your life in some way, whether you're watching online or listening in your car or whatever you're doing. We're so glad to be a part of it. I'm Kevin, here with my friend Rob Ginta.
Hey, guys.
It's so cool to be back together. And if you're watching on the video, we're in a new space. So we've been displaced. And our producer, Zach, has found us a great location. Who knows how long we'll be in this space, but here we are, the Green Room.
A couple of podcast vagabonds.
That's right. We've gone mobile. We almost did this in Zach's car. So
I suggested that.
Maybe sometime we could do that. What's that talk show host that does like the karaoke in his car?
Is it Colbert?
James Gordon? Somebody? Anyways, there's a guy who does karaoke in his car. Maybe we'll do that one day.
The British guy.
Yeah.
He's done with like Justin Bieber.
Yeah, sure.
Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name. Zach, what's his name?
James Corden. That's it.
Wait.
James Corden Blue. That's what we're going with.
Are you messing with me?
Yes, he is. But it's close. So anyways,
Forget what he just said.
We'll just do this. And one of my favorite talk show hosts, which as a pastor and Christian, I probably can't condone all of what he does, but is a British guy named Graham Norton.
Okay.
If you are looking for the funniest talk show ever,
all right,
the Graham Norton Show, please don't email me with complaints about some of the content of it, but just saying, it's funny. So before we dive into today's topic, I want to talk about the elephant in the room.
Beautiful mug, Kevin.
Two things. First of all, I'm drinking from a stolen coffee mug. This is Heather Lovelet's coffee mug. That's what, therefore it's an H. If you're listening, you won't see this. I've got a coffee mug with a big H on it. It's Heather Lovelet's. And I did this for two reasons. First of all, I needed a cup of coffee.
Yep.
And this mug was available in the office. B, I just want to mess with Heather. Maybe C is I want to know if Heather actually is watching in or listening. So we're not going to say anything to Heather, and we'll find out if she. So if you're listening, you're friends with Heather, do us a favor. Don't text her and be like, you need to listen to it. They talk about you. But
I'm giving you a play-by-play of what's happening right now. Heather, I know she listens on Spotify.
Okay.
She's listening on Spotify. She's going, what? He's drinking out of my mug?
That's right.
And she's probably on her phone in her car right now. Get off your phone, Heather. You're driving. And hopping onto YouTube to confirm that this is happening.
Yeah. And that's just to most of you guys know me from these podcasts or for speaking, and I can be very serious, but I can also be very playful. And Heather, you won't know whether or not I actually washed this mug before I put it back either. So anyways, I will. It's COVID. It's COVID season. I'll wash it. I'll wash it. But maybe I won't rinse it. Maybe I won't rinse it so her coffee will taste like soap.
Oh, man.
Anyways.
Talk about some bitter coffee, man.
She'll have suds in her coffee. So anyways.
It's extra foamy.
That's right. And I also have to, another confession is while I am a coffee snob and a coffee connoisseur of fine coffee, I even roast my own coffee. Fun fact.
Yep. Yeah, you do.
I have in here the lowest of the low, a no-name Aldi brand K-Cup. So I just want people to know that I can be a commoner. I can be a man of the people. And no, I'm just joking.
A man of the people.
I'm a man
I've been
of the
blessed.
People. I drink crappy coffee.
Paulini Passley gave me my coffee today. Thank you, Paulini. I came in. I was like, I need some coffee. She's like, I'm making a pot right now. And I'm like, you are an angel sent from God. Thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you, Paulini, for this. This podcast would not be happening right now if I didn't have this in hand. But
and
anyway,
thank you, Heather, for your amazing mug.
Paulini and Heather, great women, great leaders in ministry.
Cheers.
Cheers to amazing women Christian leaders in ministry.
Absolutely.
They're the best.
Yes. All right, great. Awesome. So, Rob, today we are following up on this Being Like Jesus challenge that we're in the middle of at Sanctuary and all of Black Rock. And this week's theme was talking about community and the power of community, and community was important to Jesus.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's dive in. What was on your heart in a nutshell of what you intended to share? And if if you weren't there on Sunday night, Rob really felt God call an audible, which we really encourage people to follow, even though it can be risky, it can be messy. But God's always good,
Right.
and so the intended message that you were planning to bring didn't come in the same way. But I thought maybe this is a great chance just to kind of summarize what your thoughts were, and from Sunday night talking about community, and then we can just kind of see where God takes it from there.
Sure. Maybe just a couple things. I love how you were talking about following that audible, even if it's messy. That was actually my first time doing that. And it definitely grew my relationship with God personally. And I went up there, and there were some doubts. I mean, I mentioned it on Sunday. I'm more of a, hey, the Spirit is in the planning, just like He's in spontaneous moments.
Totally.
So I actually enjoy that I get to labor with the Holy Spirit when I'm crafting messages, or when we're thinking about a podcast, etc. I love how I get to partner with Him in that, and believe He's in and upon that. But yeah, that was a spontaneous moment. Felt Him going in a different direction. And I went up there as I was having these doubts, and I said, you know what? If nothing else, even if this is a terrible message, at least I can leave this platform saying, God, to the best of my abilities, I obeyed your Spirit's prompting in my life, and I obeyed it quickly. Like, because there have been too many other moments in life, not necessarily speaking, but other times where I felt a prompting from the Holy Spirit, haven't obeyed, and then later it's like, oh man, I just wasted a moment. So anyway, that's what Sunday night was partially, was just obedience to what God had and trying to model that. And I went back and listened because, again, I didn't write the message beforehand.
Right. What did I say?
Yeah, so I actually listened to it a couple of times in preparation for today of like, what did I even say? And, you go back and I'm like, yeah, this isn't the greatest message I've ever preached, but I definitely felt like, hey, the Spirit was on this and it resonated with people. It resonated with me. It wasn't, the most well put together and like cohesive message I've ever done. But it's one that had a lot of truth in it. And I think the two biggest things that the Lord was highlighting for me in that message when it came to community in particular had to do with our trust in God and community with Him and our trust in each other. So I mentioned a couple things. I said when it came to our relationship with God, that surface level trust will breed surface level freedom. And what I mean by that is not that God is withholding freedom from us, but the freedom that we will experience from Him will be limited if we can't trust all of us into God's hands. And I tried sharing parts of my story where I had, again, I grew up as a church kid, I mentioned, and I love that I did. I'm so grateful that I grew up in the church. Not that one's better than the other, but I'm glad for I started off with a solid foundation. But for the first 19 years of my life, I would trust parts of my life to God, but not all of me to God. There was partial surrender, but not full surrender. I could trust Him with my best, but I wasn't able to trust Him with my worst. And because of that, I felt trapped in a lot of ways. I knew that Jesus forgave sins, but I didn't know that He forgave my own sin. And it's not all of my sin, I should say, because there were some things where I'm like, man, this was so bad. Like, Jesus, I can't talk to you about this. And He's like, no, like, I died for that. Like, on your worst day, I died for you. Romans 5:8, while we were still sinners, Jesus died for us. And I'm grateful for that. So once I began to, I had that turning point on January 4th, 2013, which I'll talk about in a moment. But once I began to trust Jesus with all of me, I felt like I began to experience new depths and levels of freedom that I previously had never encountered before. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever. And I'm going to it was one of those moments where it's like, from this day on, I'm going to open myself up. I'm going to look like a fool a few times. I might even be rejected by people sometimes who just don't get what I've experienced. But I want to open up and share my weakness so that because I just so desperately want to see people experience the freedom of Jesus in ways that I have, and if not even better.
So if I hear you right, part of it was this experience of shame on some level of even going, I can't, and shame causes us to hide. That's just reality. It's the same thing that happened in the garden,
Right.
with Adam and Eve. When they sinned, they hid. That was their first thing, the shame, and then they covered themselves. And we do that. We do that.
That was
So,
me.
We
That
all
was
do
me.
it. We cover it in different ways. And especially if you do grow up in the church, you learn churchy ways to cover yourself, to hide, to protect, to cover your shame, or to pretend, or to wear masks or whatever. So for you, that there was this journey of going, hey, I'm letting Jesus into those places I've hidden from him. We all keep places. Yeah, why don't you talk about, Rob, because I was there, why don't you talk about that car ride that led, because we're talking about the power of community and in community. How did that experience of car community lead to this personally for you, and then what did it look like in community?
Yeah. That's great. So I was talking about that story with the second part of surface level trust in human relationships will bring surface level relationships. Like, you won't have deep friendships. So I was in a car ride. I attended Passion Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, at the beginning of 2013, and went down with some Connecticut people, but drove back to school. I had a bunch of friends from the university that were there too. So I linked up with a guy who was actually my roommate for a couple of years, my friend John, and also went in the car with my buddy Matt. And they both went to the same school as me. It's like a 12-hour plus drive from Atlanta to West Palm Beach. So we were in the car, and this is still, like, at that point I still had a flip phone. Instagram wasn't really too much of a thing. So we were in the car, and we were listening to CDs, because that's what you did. And then after a little while, we were just kind of like, hey, like, I don't remember who initiated it. I think it was my friend Matt. Was like, what if we just shared our stories with each other?
Wow.
Like, hey, we're pretty good friends. We've been going to college for a couple of years together now. Like, how about we just share, like, how'd you encounter Jesus? Like, we just had this great encounter that past week or past weekend at Passion Conference
with 20,000 people.
Oh, actually, at that time it was like 70,000. Wow. It was that was like the biggest year that they had, and I happened to be there. It was like 70,000 college students.
So now you're in a car with three.
So now I'm in a car,
of you,
and there's three of us, and Matt musters up the courage to, like, break the ice and be like, hey, like, how about we just share our stories, how we met Jesus? And he's like, and I'll start.
Okay, push pause right there, because I think that's you were jokingly talking about flip phones, CDs, as being part of 2013.
I'm moving back to that in 2021, by the way.
But and here's why I think that's important, because if it was 2020 and you had your smartphone and you had social media, maybe that conversation, because that's what happened. It started with, hey, let's talk about more than sports or whatever. And we love talking about sports and stuff like that.
Right.
But you had a real conversation. Someone took the initiative to go, hey, let's talk about, let's get to know each other. Let's have a conversation about our stories. I love that, because that's so easy to miss right now.
Right.
Because it's so easy just to go, let me look at my screen. Let me get distracted. We were joking about this with our high school students last night. It's easy to get three friends together and we're all on our phones and we're not having a conversation anymore. And so we have an opportunity for deep community, and what we'd rather do is look at what everybody else who isn't there is doing in life.
Yeah.
So that's a brave conversation, and
Right.
so that's a point, like, that we need to highlight. Let's talk. That's a good start.
Yeah.
Good things come out of good conversations.
Right.
So
And
I love
good
that.
things come out of boredom too. I think we've lost the art of boredom.
Yeah.
And some of the most creative ideas, some of the best conversations, some of those intimate moments with the Lord, some of the best music, the best art has been created when people have been bored. So I think that, and that's another podcast for another day.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in a lot of ways, we were like, hey, you can only look out a window for so long at
Right.
like Georgia gets pretty flat in the South and it's uninteresting. So it's like you can only look out a window so long. So
So someone says, let's
Matt
share
brought
stories.
it up. And since he brought it up too, he was also kind of one that was like, I'll start. And in that way, he kind of set the level of expectation of like, and I'm the guy who still at this point, I hadn't shared my full story with anyone. So I'm sitting in the back of this car, kind of listening in. I'm like, all right, this guy says he's going to share a story. Am I going to get like, I don't know, like a polished story right now, So I'm listening in because his level of deepness, I wasn't going to pass that, especially at that point in my life. And he went all in. And I'm not here, he got real with me, but I'm not here to air out his dirty laundry. But the Lord grabbed hold of his life when he was not for him at all. And I was just like, all right, wow, Matt went in. He felt safe sharing that with John and I feel safe now. And actually, John shared his as well because I was still like a little bit nervous. And then I'm like, all right, if these two guys can go all in, and if they trust me with theirs, I think I can trust them with mine. And I just shared my story. I shared how, especially at the end of my high school career, and even in the beginning of college, just really got caught up. Had a lot of I was hurt myself and confused and lonely, and also had a ton of hormones going off. And I thought that the way that my loneliness can be fixed is if I hook up with girls. And that was a huge part of my story. And I felt awful knowing how many people I hurt because of my poor decisions and lack of self-control. Now,
and actually, a way to deal with that shame that you were already feeling.
What's that?
That was your way of dealing with. I'm hiding stuff from myself, from others, and things like that. But I still have a need to be known.
Right.
And so we come up with counterfeit forms of community too.
Yeah. Yep. So I was kind of like hiding and disguising myself in shame. I actually feel like a large part of the reason why I went to school so far from Connecticut is I want to run from the chaos I created here and the people that I hurt. And a lot of them I've had great conversations with, asked for forgiveness, just said, hey, what I did was not okay. And, most of them hardly even thought of it. Like a bunch of us were in high school. This is kind of like what high school kids did. But I'm like, I know better. I know Jesus and his ways. And I'm like, I'm sorry that I did not represent the Jesus who I know so well to you.
Right.
That I didn't care for you like a sister, that I wasn't gentle, that I didn't demonstrate self-control. Please forgive me. So anyway, I shared that with them and mentioned how, for some of these people, it had been like 3 years since I made some of these stupid choices. And I'm like, I still feel the shame for those actions today. And that's when they stepped in and just told me about the grace of Jesus, and where they said, hey, even if those people aren't ready to forgive you, or if they never forgive you, Jesus already has, and he will. And I just felt so freed by that because, I thought that in order for me to be forgiven, that everyone had to forgive me. But God's love isn't contingent on that. God's forgiveness wasn't contingent on that. So that was like a game changer for me. And it built my trust in God, built my trust in others. It helped me experience the realities of what Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10, which you mentioned on Sunday night and read out loud for us. Thank you. That's kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah. So for you, you experienced a deeper level of grace, the grace of Christ, but it also happened within a community, a safe place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. It was a
I
game
was not
changer for
expecting to
you.
go this way with the podcast either.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry about that too.
No, I think it's fine.
Like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Was not expecting to, like, air out my past, but yeah, I hope that even for those of you that have listened to this, that you'll find freedom in that.
Right.
That, hey, if there's anything that you want, like the freedom that I've experienced, you can too. Like that's
Totally.
my heart in sharing these things of like, oh my gosh, like Jesus is so awesome. And I've turned from those ways.
Right.
Like there's definitely been a repentance, but yeah, anyway,
No,
going to what you wanted to talk about.
Absolutely. So, let's go back and talk about like how that then did that moment not only obviously change, it was a game changer for your relationship with Jesus. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I can be real. I can, obviously it was a process too, but I can let Jesus into the places I've been hiding for a while. I can let Jesus into the places that have been hurting before. And obviously that helps bring healing to that stuff, for sure. How is that a game changer for giving you a taste of true community and friendship? And then, talk about that, Rob. Like, how was that a game changer for your experience of community? Because like you said, you grew up in church, but maybe there was this, now you're experiencing a deeper level of community, the way that God, that was transformative for you.
Right. Yeah. As you mentioned, like complete game changer when it came to community as a whole. I even remember shortly after that, I called up like my brother and his buddies, and I came home that summer and I shared that story with them.
Who was still
too.
in high school.
He was a junior in high school at the time. So I saw this as, hey, this will be a good preventative measure for these guys because they're about to go into a summer where I like essentially was not living in God's ways. So I'm like, let me bring this in as like a preventative measure to say, don't do my stupid mistakes. But if you have, hey, there's grace for this. So it changed that. It changed my other friendships as a whole. Like I just became so much more trusting in people and of people. And I think it's also because I had this deep trust now that regardless of how people might react to me, ever, and it doesn't have to be just about this specific area, but just in general, I became so confident in the love and forgiveness that Jesus has for me. I'm like, whatever people think about me, it doesn't even matter. Like, I'm so covered by love and forgiveness, and yeah, we talk about loving kindness. I'm so covered by that. There's nothing that is going to stop God from doing that. There's nothing that's going to get in the way. There's no reaction from a person that is going to make God be like, all right, you know what, Rob, since this person's mad, I'm going to put this forgiveness I have for you on hold. So I just became so confident in him, and I started sharing and started being more real with people, started talking about things that actually matter. And I needed friends like Matt and John, and there have been, so many others along the way now who have just helped remind me I'm better than my worst days. And I try to be that for others now too. Like I have some friends, I actually learned this from Bob Goff. I've written down, I have a calendar of certain events in my friends' lives where it's like, I know one of my friends, like on this date, like he got out of prison. And I make sure that every year I text him on that day, say, look at how far you've come. Like you're better than your worst days. Like look at how far Jesus has brought you. I have another friend who struggle with alcoholism, and same thing, like on his sobriety anniversary, I'm making sure I'm shooting him a text. And other people that have just like whatever the world would say, as which this is so contrary to culture right now, but whatever the world would say, this is a reason why you should not be a part of our society anymore. Like you are now known for this worst like this terrible moment in your life, I want to actually remind them on that day where they can maybe feel those fears or doubts or insecure because of past mistakes that they have. I want to say you're better than your past mistakes.
Yeah, for real.
Like, man, the love of Jesus has covered you. Like, look at how far you've come. Look at how much you've grown as a person. Look at where you are in your friendships and relationships now, and just kind of speak life into them on those terrible moments, because I've received that and I want to give that as well. So I expect that from my friends, but I also expect myself to be that friend for others as well.
Which is cool. That is the power of true community. If you've experienced it yourself and the impact that it's had on you, then you can help create that culture, that life-giving thing. You came back and said, hey, to your brother, Zach, and you guys, first of all, learn from my mistakes, but also learn from, you're still in high school. You're part of a youth group here. You've got community. Go deep with each other, and with Jesus,
right.
in that way. Do it together.
Yep.
So, Zach, talking about your brother, Zach. Anyways, Rob.
Oh man, that is like the billionth time that's happened in my life.
I'm sure.
So
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's all right.
I forgive you.
No worries. That's all right. I do it to my kids too. I even call my kids by the dog's name every once in a while. Anyway, yeah. So if you're a young person, a young adult listening to this podcast and going like, oh, I would love to have that level of life-giving, Christ-centered, grace-filled community, but I don't have that yet. What advice would you give to them?
Don't pull out of relationships. I think it's, one of the things I did want to mention initially that I had written down is, the whole like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Like, if you're only hanging out with people that are not like, and I'm not saying get rid of your non-Christian friends. I'm so grateful that I have non-Christian family members and non-Christian friends. Like, I'm grateful for them, but those aren't the people that I'm ultimately going and sharing the deepest parts of my life with, because they don't have a Christ-centered perspective. So if your core group of like 3 guys or gals in your life, like if they aren't Jesus followers, it's tough to really go into this. And I would say first, make some friendships with people that know Jesus, that are pursuing after him, etc. Stay committed to those friendships. And like, here's what I'll say too. Some of this takes time. So the way that I'm going to be trusting of people, like I'm kind of just an open book, but I'm an anomaly in that way. And I feel like part of that is because of the job that I have too. I feel like it helps with that. But it's important to have like I was friends with Matt and John. Like, we had gone surfing for 2 years before we had that conversation. We were skating late at night. We were playing video games together. We were goofing off, doing things that college guys do. So we had a level of some type of friendship before we went into that.
You had some common interest. You had fun together.
Yeah, we were able to have fun.
Yeah.
But I would say for the people where it's like, hey, you've been buddies for a little bit, and it doesn't have to be 2 years, but I'm like, hey, if you've been friends with someone, for more than, again, I don't want us to become Methodists. Like, I don't want to follow like this method, but like, if you've been friends for 6 months and the only thing you've talked about is surface level conversation, I think that, maybe be bold to break the ice and say, hey, I'd love for us to maybe talk about this, or can I share this with you? I'm grateful again for my friend Matt who broke the ice that day, because that just completely changed my life. So at some point you got to be bold. Yeah. At some point you got to go for it. And again, I wouldn't say do that, the first time meeting someone, because that will kind of scare them off. But That's just, I don't know. Is that helpful? Is that
No,
practical enough?
Yeah.
Is that a good activation point?
It's going to take risk. It's going to take, to go back to what we started in the beginning with, to develop deep community and friendships is going to require trust.
Yeah.
You're going to have to trust people with parts of who you are.
Right.
Even if you, like you talked about, even you said, hey, this is a game changer for me. I came to a point where I said, because of the grace and the love of Christ, I don't care if people reject me. And, most people, though, are still afraid of that rejection. But if you want that deep level of community that helps lead to greater levels of freedom and things like that, it's going to take risk. You're going to have to put yourself out there, knowing that maybe not everybody is ready for that, knowing that everyone's not able or capable to have that deep level of friendship. I was just meeting with a guy the other day, young adult, who has a good group of friends that, same thing. They do stuff together. They have fun together. They have common interests. They play video games and things like that. But he's saying, but all we have is surface conversations. And I said, well, have you ever tried to go deeper? And he said, yeah, a couple times. And he goes, either they weren't ready for it or they just would rather keep it casual, surface level conversation, or they're just, sometimes there's people either not ready or they're not really deep anyways. And that's all they ever have. And I would say everyone's capable of going deeper, but
I know we got to wrap up, but I want to go back to that because everybody desires to be known.
Absolutely.
Everyone does. So if you're really good friends with someone and you've established a level of trust where there's humility and you're able to have an open and honest conversation with them, if your friend is unwilling to go deeper, I would ask, hey, why is that?
Right.
Why is that the case? Because I believe that every single person desires to be known. And that's even why we've seen this rise of social media, because people desire to be known. People want to be loved and liked. And yeah, I'm just like, everybody has that capability to go deeper, even if they say, I'm not a deep person. And I'm like, well, you're not a shallow person either. Like, you're more complex than you even realize.
And it's a God-given need.
It's a God-given need.
And that need you're going to meet in ways, I think it was C.S. Lewis who said basically the enemy is really good at taking God-given needs and convincing you to meet them in ungodly ways.
Mm-hmm.
God-given appetites, God-given desires, God-given needs, and have them met in ungodly ways, which usually means unhealthy ways, which usually leads that those needs don't ever get really met. And so that's a whole other conversation to have. But you're right. We all have a need to be loved and accepted and known. First of all, by our Creator, by our Father, to help deal with those shame and sin stuff. But then to do it in a community of going, hey, we're on this journey together. Yeah. And like you said, texting your friends, encouraging your friends, calling your friends to go, let's do this together. We're in this together. It's hard enough to do it alone. Let's do it. We weren't created for it and to do it. So, I think, and I agree with everything you said. And the other thing I would say is it takes risk and it takes time. It takes time.
Yep.
You can't join a church or a group and think, hey, in 2 weeks, I'm going to have the best friendships of my entire life.
Yep.
It takes time.
Get planted.
Yeah. So it's going to take commitment and perseverance too.
Commitment, perseverance, being the type of person that you're expecting other people to be to you.
Yeah.
Like, the golden rule, treat others as you would want to be treated. Like that same rule applies for friendships. And I know we really got to wrap up. Here's what I will say, friends. We want to go and continue to go deeper and community and friendships and relationships and talk about this stuff. So after this being like Jesus challenge, we're actually going to do a series all about this.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to be like, oh, he didn't talk about it again. Like, thank you for being patient with me again. We will be talking about this next month after our Being Like Jesus challenge. We have a whole series planned just to talk about building friendships and community and relationship, which is going to be great.
That's cool.
Kev, you want to bless people?
Yeah, I would love to do that. Thanks for joining us, and I want to send us out with a blessing of may you have the courage and the boldness to share the deepest parts of who you are with Jesus who loves you. May you have the boldness and courage to reveal more of yourself to those around you, to develop deep community and friendship. May you learn that the life that God's called you to live only happens in life on life, daily walking out in community with each other through Jesus Christ. Have an awesome week. Bless you guys. Hope to see you on Sunday night at Sanctuary, and hope you just join us wherever you are on this podcast. Awesome. Bless you guys. Talk to you later.